Dark Slab Audio on music production and audio engineering. Welcome to Dark Slab Audio and our 5th Master Series. I do believe this is the 15th video in our 5th Master Series, Professional Sounding Results from Your Home Studio. And in this video, we're going to be talking about cables and cable concerns. So this will be a very short video because this is a very simple subject. I'm going to talk about a couple things and basically let it be at that, and you might want to do a little bit of research. Because basically, whenever you get into cables and whenever you're dealing with music production, there are tons of different types of cables. I mean, there are just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different types of cables, different quality of types of cables, and it's just mind-boggling how many different types of cables they have. So basically, there's a mountain of cables that you can research. The first thing you want to keep in your head that for the most part, you're going to want to research analog signals and digital data and digital signals, because those two are most of the time what you're using to transfer data, unless you're using fiber optics or something like that. And getting familiar with those two areas is going to be very helpful reading about that. You know, when we get into what makes one cable better than the other, or why you want good cables in a recording studio, first of all, I suggest you research both these, Google it, and read about it for a while. It's going to help you immensely understanding what's happening, that you're trying to transfer information from one place to another and how that can be affected. The first thing you want to keep in mind is that we're not doing scientific work, we're making music. So we don't have to worry about it that much as some people would have you believe, because it's probably not affecting the audio nowhere near as much as you might think. You don't want to have really super long cables or really super inexpensive cables, because it can degrade the audio quality with things like distortion, saturation, degradation, impedance. I mean, all kinds of things that are basically simply dealing with obstructing the transfer of information or degrading it. But you really don't need to get that concerned about it. And basically, you can get on, like, here's UA, a site that talks about cable glossary and talking about cables. And here's another one, the Ultimate Guide to Audio Cables for Home Recording. And some of these places can give you some good info. Just make sure it's like going to a doctor. With anything I tell you, you get information from everybody, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different people, because you know, I can't guarantee you'll always be getting good information. But the bottom line is that if you go look at cables for your studio monitors, connectors, you know, any connectors you're using for interfaces, for audio, for ADAT, for MIDI, whatever you're doing, that do a little bit of reading about it, because you will basically come to the understanding, like if I'm going to get some XLR cables, that this is a list of what they think the 6 best XLR cables on this one individual. I haven't researched it and asked 5, 10, 15 people, but that's what they're saying. And then if you look at it, that for the most part, that if you get somewhere in the middle to the higher end, you're probably going to be okay doing music production, unless you're in some really big fancy studio. I mean, if you're in a $10 million studio, I suggest you buy like you're in a $10 million studio. Otherwise, I wouldn't worry about that so much. You know, you've got budget, mid-range here, high-end cables. And normally that's trying to give you some kind of an understanding of the quality that's put in there, how well they're engineered and how good of the engineering is and the components that they've used. But for the most part, if you get, like, here's cheap cables, one for $3, one for $2, one for $4, you know, somewhere between middle of the road and upper end, you're probably going to be okay because we're not doing scientific work. So when you figure out what you have in your studio and you start figuring you have to transfer information from one place to another, whether it's MIDI, whether it's some other type of electronic data, whether it's electronic data, analog signals, that just do some reading about it. You know, I'm transferring from my mixer or my interface to my monitors, you know, and read about it a little bit. But once you get an understanding of what you need, it's pretty simple. It's not that time consuming. Somewhere between middle of the road and upper end, you're going to probably be fine. Don't, you know, get yourself so wrapped up in it. You'll be more concerned about not having a mess of cables. I'm telling you, once you get it plugged in and you get it set up, you'll be more worried about the mess you have to deal with every now and then when something ain't going right, trying to figure out where is those cables all going. If you got some rat nest, or I should say some mess, that you don't want to have things organized. Does that make sense? But don't get yourself, if I was doing work for NASA or something that I was working in MATLAB with to do some scientific work, I'd be really worried about when data gets transferred that it doesn't take much, that the reading's off by bazillions, and that's it. The whole experiment is done for if it's off by that much. In music, we do not have to worry about it that much. Trust me on that. So don't get yourself lost in the cable search and trying to make sure you got cables. Take that advice and run with it. And I do suggest you read a little bit like I suggested, and you'll probably be fine. If you're in a really big studio and you've got really super expensive equipment and a lot of really expensive equipment, I suggest you buy like you have a really expensive equipment because you have a budget for it more than likely. If you're a small home studio, you know, a small professional studio or even a mid-sized professional studio, I wouldn't get that concerned about it. We're not doing scientific work, and the transfer of information more than likely was somewhere that's, you know, middle of the road to upper end, and somewhere in between there, you are probably going to be fine for music production, even doing stuff that is radio ready. So don't get yourself lost in the cable problem or issue. You're probably okay there with a little bit of thought, a little bit of research, and making good purchases. So peace, self-love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this next video and our 5th Master Series, Professional Sounding Results in Your Home Studio, and I will see you in the next video.